Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I've got Kathy White on the show. She's a yoga instructor and the developer of the Joint Renewal System, which is really a system to give us a different way of aging, I'll put it. And I'll let Kathy explain more about that as we get into the conversation. But first of all, Kathy, thanks for joining me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thank you, Dan. Yeah, great to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get into the conversation, just introduce yourself to my audience. Who is Kathy today in your own words?
Oh, thank you. I mean, introductions are interesting, aren't they? They're like how long shall I take? Do you want the full-blown thing or just a really short one-liner? No, I'll be brief. I'm originally from the UK. I now live on Vancouver Island in Canada, and I've been a lifelong yogi. Can say that. I'm also an art psychotherapist, certified facilitator of the work of Byron Katie. So I do yoga for the mind as well as for the body. But in terms of the physical thing that I offer, the Joint Renewal System, this came to me, gosh, when I was in my late 40s, and I was going through perimenopausal symptoms, and my yoga practice that I was doing at the time just wasn't working for me. So I researched, I looked for other teachers, I looked for other methodologies, and then I ended up doing a retrain in the Kaiut method, which comes from Brazil. And from that, I based my joint renewal system on what I experienced in my own body. And then I started to see it with my students. Like, this was a very, very different approach to yoga, and it really works. With consistent practice, it really helps rejuvenate the joints, which, as we age, for most of us, that starts to be areas of the body, hips, knees, shoulders, neck, spine, ankles. Those joints, they start to become problematic for many of us. So I'm just delighted to have this way of working with the body and the mind. There's a kind of mind piece which we can get onto later, but yeah.
And I think that's the constant human battle with Father Time, is that we all know that it's just the cycle of life, but yet we try to fight it with tooth and nail, and there's times where things you used to do, you may still be able to do them, but then the next morning you feel muscles that you didn't realize you had anymore at that time. So it sounds like you really have kind of discovered a fountain of youth, so to speak, and a way to continue to do those things that we were able to do while we were younger, and not have to deal with the consequences the next morning of what we did. So
yeah. I mean, what I like to say is, like, I'm not teaching people to become members of Cirque du Soleil. They're not they're not going to be sort of super athletic, acrobatic, whatever. It's more about keeping the mobility that you have right now, so that in 10 years time you still have the mobility you have today. So it's not so much about increasing range of motion, although that definitely does occur, but it's about keeping that decline, as it were, keeping that at bay. So that, and that's quite phenomenal. When I tell students, they'll come to me and they'll say, "Oh, Kathy, there's no difference. My hips are still, really the same. They feel, I'm still not being able to do my forward flexions or whatever." And I'll say, "Yeah, but you've been coming for 2 years. And if they're still the same, you're 2 years older. That's quite remarkable. You haven't gone into more of a lockdown in your," using that word with humor, a lockdown in your body. It's possible. And I think also what many people when we think about fitness when we're younger, we often get caught up in the whole idea of cardio, of movement, of bigger, better, faster, more. I've got to cycle faster, I've got to run harder, I've got to lift more weights, I've got to tread more stairs at the gym, or whatever it is that people do. The mindset, the tendency to think about those things is always that I've got to do more, and doing more is better. Well, actually, with the way I approach the body is actually less is more, because what we're needing to do is, and a lot of fitness things don't do this, is we need to calm our nervous system. We really need to learn how to move our body in a way that is congruent and authentic with the movements within the body itself, and that we're not in this adrenaline rush all the time, because the body doesn't heal when we're on full alert. When we're doing a marathon, the body's not healing. When we're doing, our workout at the gym, the body isn't healing. Yes, it might be building muscle, the heart might be pumping faster, you're getting good lung capacity and growing all that. But if the stuff that the body needs to do to restore itself, to rejuvenate and to renew, it's not going to happen at the gym. So the yoga becomes this place where, this is my time for restoration. This is my time for healing. Calm the nervous system, bring presence in, bring a sense of what's happening in the body much more, making that body-mind connection much more connected. And then things can happen to heal, because the body does heal. It does heal itself. It's remarkable. It's got this innate capacity for healing. And we just need to give it the right conditions to heal. And why do we go to bed when we're sick? Because that's where we heal. So we need to have those moments in our day, in our daily practice, to actually give a place for restoration.
And I think that's so important. And it makes me think of, I'm a baseball guy at heart. I coached baseball for 30 years before we, did the RV thing, and kind of reminds me a lot of the argument in Major League Baseball during the steroid era, where, some of these older players who were excelling, I always had the argument as, a steroid never helped a guy, hit a baseball further, or throw a baseball faster, or be able to hit a baseball more often. But in your older years, what the steroid did is help them heal and recover quicker, where these guys who are still excelling at the same pace they were in their 20s and 30s were doing that same stuff in their 40s, because of the recovery process that the chemicals were were helping them. Right. There, it didn't necessarily help them hit more home runs, but it helped them get back onto the field every day, where through a natural process and the natural aging process, it would have been tougher for them to perform at that level on a day in and day out basis. So obviously you're not using chemicals, you're using a much more natural and holistic approach to that healing. But I guess one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is just, the constant rat race that society tells us to be in. Is it's difficult for people to take, 30 minutes or an hour or whatever the case is, to really, take that time that's so important to allow your body to heal and to meditate or to do yoga or whatever the case is. Talk a little bit about the importance that is to take that break and, get off the wheel for a little bit and allow your body and mind to heal. And if you can go in a little bit about how, the mind and body are really tied together.
Sure. I mean, I think in terms of scheduling your day, it's funny because, I do this myself. We tend to think of, and there's my day, and these are all the things I need to do in my day. And then I need to squeeze in my meditation practice, or then I need to squeeze in a bit of time for yoga, and then I look at my schedule and think, oh well, I'm not sure I'll be able to do yoga today, and off it comes off the list. So what I invite my students to do is to say, put yoga in first. Like, put your meditation in practice in first, put your walk in nature in first, like those things that really, really nourish you, make those the priority, and then wrap your day around that, because that's a real act of self-care, of self-compassion, self-love, is that you realize how important those things are for your long-term well-being and health. So that's the priority. The problem being, Dan, is that because we're on this treadmill and we're on this fast we're all so adrenaline fueled that you kind of know as a concept that, oh yeah, I know, meditation would be a good thing for me, or it would be good for me. Oh, yeah, I know that, and I've got to do this, and I'm busy, and I'm going to keep running, and I'm going to keep doing. And so the adrenaline fueled mind doesn't ever want to stop, because it just feeds itself. So making that shift, and I think nature is very, very powerful in the way that it can help people just decompress. So if it's just walk to the park and stand by a tree, check out the grass, the leaves, that something natural. The body naturally goes more into a place of homeostasis when it's in nature. We're in our natural environment, when we're off our phones, off our computers, and not having lots of input into the system. And then, making it a priority. So, and it does start to, over time, and that's why I really encourage people to do a daily practice, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. One of the favorite parts of my membership site, my website, is my students love the daily 15. So I've got these little 15-minute videos that they go, oh yeah, I can do that. They don't have to set aside a whole hour. But then once they got on the mat and they do 15 minutes, they kind of look at their clock. No, I could be here a little while longer. I know, and then it can extend to half an hour, whatever. But if you kind of trick the mind into thinking it's just going to be 5 minutes, we can manage 5. The busy mind will go, oh, okay, right, yeah, just 5. And then, but once you're there, once you're on your mat, once you're in that space that you could create, and again, to create a really lovely environment for it, so it feels nourishing to walk into that spot, then it's easier to start stacking more time on top of that.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you said about nature, because I'm an avid dog walker, and so I'm always carving out enough time for me and my dog to go on a good 3 to 5 mile walk. And sometimes we'll just do it around, we're not in the RV right now, as you can tell by my background. So, we're in a neighborhood, and sometimes we'll walk around the neighborhood, but there's, some trails that are fairly close to us as well. So I try to, as often as I can, get out on the trail. And there's actually, there is a difference in how your mind and body responds from just walking through the neighborhood compared to actually on the trail and out in nature. And it's interesting that you brought that up. And again, if you could kind of just expand on that a little bit for me, because it's not anything I really thought about. It's just something I've felt, that I do feel more rejuvenated after we hike on a trail, as opposed to just, walking through the neighborhood. So I'd really like to, kind of have you expand on that, where you talked about that is our natural state, to be out in nature. So if you could kind of give me your thoughts on that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just it's evolutionary, really. Is like our DNA, for millennia, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, our ancestors were in the forest or on the savannah, or that is our natural habitat. And it's a very recent development in human evolution that we started building homes and having square walls around us. It's, just a matter of, 1,000 years or whatever. We were living in huts not so long ago, and we were much, much more connected to the land. And so I think it's about nature is us. We are nature. We come from nature. We're nourished by nature, and so this man-made environment is lovely. We have beautiful homes. We have wonderful RVs that we can travel around in. I mean, technology is fantastic. And there's something about needing to reconnect to our basic essence, the essence from which we came from, our ancestry, and that is nature. We are nature. We are from it. We return to it. That's we are part of the cycle of life. And I think, the ancient yogis, they knew that. Like so many of the yoga poses, if people are familiar with yoga at all, are named after animals. Or there's mountain pose, there's tree pose, there's cobra pose, there's downward dog. There's all these poses that are actually named after creatures or things of nature.
Yeah, that's incredible. Like you said, I've never really given it a lot of thought, but once you said that, it triggered in my mind just again what I feel, the difference, and not that walking in your neighborhood is bad by any stretch.
No, not at all. I mean, if you're going for a walk, go for a walk. And you can have your focus on, like, walk through the neighborhood and just notice all the trees, notice the grass, notice the flower baskets, notice the nature in your neighborhood. That would be a way in which you can absorb that too, even if you're in an urban environment.
Yeah, that's always one of the things I say is the best lessons of walking a dog, is because they do appreciate and stop and smell, and we're more concerned with what's our pace, what's our heart rate, that sort of thing. Where the dog is like, no, we're going to stop, and we're going to smell this mailbox, or whatever the case is.
Here we are, wag our tails and just be out for the fun of it. Exactly. Yeah.
Sure. So, so as you were, developing this, I mean, how long did the process take? You said that you've really taken, pieces of everything that you've studied and learned through yoga to develop this. How long did it take you? And what was that process like for you developing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I did my first training in the Kaiut methodology, and when I did that, I was like, oh wow, this is amazing, and all my other experience of yoga also was present, and so then when I started teaching and thinking, well, how can I describe what it is that I do? Because nobody's ever heard of the method that I trained in. It's yoga, but it's not yoga in a way, because people have an idea of yoga. You have to do these complicated poses, and you need to be flexible, and you have to. It's like, no, not at all. I mean, my 92-year-old father joins me on Zoom twice a week to do yoga with me, and he is not a flexible guy by any means. I mean, his big issue was getting up and down off the floor, and still remains an issue for him to some degree, but he manages to get up and down off the floor, and that's pretty amazing. So that idea that I just brought in everything that I knew, and then it's like, what is it that this system really does, which is different from other yogas? And it renews the joints, because we don't use a system of stretching, like, because if you think about it, Dan, if you've got a stiff joint and you're trying to do a forward flex, touch your toes, say, and you've got really stiff hips, and then you think, okay, well, I'll just stretch those hamstrings, I'll just stretch down, I'll just reach, and I'll pull, but that joint, that hip is locked. It's like you're going to damage your spine, you're going to, other places, other parts of your body are going to overcompensate. You're going to pull the back of your knees. You're going to damage something in order to do your forward flexion if you're just thinking stretch. What we're doing in joint renewal is like, okay, my hip's stiff. Let me come forward, maybe have a chair in front of me, and let me feel in the hip what degree of flexion I can get without stretching the back of my legs. So that eventually, as the hip starts to open, as it starts to change, then the muscle responds to that. And the muscle grows in order to accommodate the new movement available in the joint. So we're working with the joints first. And that was like the revelation that I had when I started to really work with my own body and with those with students. It's like, oh my goodness, we just need to stop stretching. And that's not to say we don't stretch. Stretching happens, but it happens where we have our focus on our joints rather than the stretch itself.
Right. So what is the average age of the clients that are doing this methodology with you right now?
Well, I tend to attract people midlife or older. 92 is my oldest student. That's my dad. And yeah, because I mean, although people can start this younger, it tends to be when you reach that certain age where you start to feel your joints, and the weather changes, oh, I'm so old, kind of get out in the morning, you're just stiff and creaky. That tends to start to happen in people in their kind of late 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond. So that's the age bracket of people that tend to come to me. Yeah. So I kind of say yoga for people over 50. I mean, it's not, anyone can do it, and anyone who has a joint issue can do this practice for sure. It tends to be people in that age bracket who are looking for something. They're starting to realize the importance of having good joint health, and they're looking for something that can help them with it.
Yeah, that was kind of what my question was leading to, is if someone in their 20s wants to start practicing this earlier, they certainly can. It's not.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I do have younger students who come to me for various issues that they have, and they get amazing benefit from it. Yeah. And especially, this younger generation who are all slouched over computers and growing up scrolling with, like limited hand movements and stuff. Like I teach a lot of hand and foot movements that bring strength back into the joints in the feet and hands.
Yeah. And that, it's interesting that you just brought that up, because I don't think that's something that we think about a lot, is what just, how the evolution of technology has, really hurt us physically. I mean, I think it's hurt us mentally in some cases as well. But, just like you said, the constant hunched over. I mean, like right now I'm actually standing, because over the summer I did a lot of podcasts, during a week when we were, time when we weren't mobile, and I was sitting, and oh man, my body just paid for it. Sitting for such long periods of time. So I've gotten to a point where, I'm standing, to do the podcast, because it's so much better on my body. So it's interesting that you brought that up. And I guess, what are some of the ways that we can combat, the constant, because people don't think of sitting at a computer desk as wear and tear on your body, or, standing there on your phone as wear and tear on your body. So if you can kind of, expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of looking at what we do with our bodies. Not so much what we do with our bodies, is what we're not doing with our bodies. Really think about what's absent in my day to day. And again, if you go back to your ancestors, how we lived, millennia ago in nature, we would be walking with bare feet or very rudimentary kind of soles shoes. So our feet were free, and our feet were touching the earth and walking over uneven surfaces. So our ankles were moving. We were constantly scanning and looking around us, looking around our environment for predators or for prey for us to catch our next dinner. So we would be looking up and round, and our eyes would be focusing distance and then close and then distance and then close, which is really good for eye muscles. We would be using our hands for tools, for crafting things, for making things. Our hands would be very adept at using for handicrafts and stuff. So all of that, and then we would be active. We'd be carrying water, we would be chopping wood, we would be doing those basic survival things. We wouldn't be using chairs, we'd be squatting at the fireplace to cook our meal. All those things are what our body evolved to do. And then rapidly in the last 200-300 years, we've got chairs, we're sitting, we're in houses, we're at computers, we've stopped. And it's not what we are doing, it's what we're not doing that the issues start to come. And if you think we're 70% water in our bodies, what happens to water when it doesn't move? It stagnates.
Yeah.
And we've just got to get ourselves kind of flowing and moving, and all the different ways in which we move, not just like on a treadmill, because that's just moving the legs, and it's a very limited movement within the hips. If you think the hip is a ball joint and it has, amazing range of motion in the hip. Most of us just do a little bit of walking, and it just doesn't have the same the potential of that joint is underused. Yeah.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about being in nature as well, is that, I just did a 20-mile hike back a little over a month ago. And during that, it was a group hike. It was an event, sort of 1,300 of us out there hiking.
Wow.
And that conversation came up with a small group of us that kind of just happened to get to that part of the trail at the same time. So we were walking a couple miles with each other and talking about how what we were doing, walking in nature on a very rough, rooty, rocky terrain, how much better that was for our muscles and our ligaments to adjust, as opposed to walking on a treadmill or, walking on a nice level street as well. Because, your foot's constantly, doing this, and it's just strengthening all those muscles.
You're going up, you're going down, the hips adjusting, the knees are adjusting. Yeah, it's beautiful. Walking on a trail is like what we were designed to walk on, uneven terrain.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing you brought up was, that we, initially were out there walking barefoot or had, very small soles. And I'm a huge fan of walking barefoot any chance I get. Obviously I won't do that on a trail, but
and shoe technology is going more basic as well. You can get kind of these barefoot soles and less support. A friend of mine said to me, I had a new pair of running shoes I got, and she said, oh, do they have really good support? And I'm like, no, I don't want support. I want my ankles to be robust and healthy enough and able to adapt and move. And my feet and all the joints in my feet, I want them to be, really working. I don't need support. Yeah.
It's funny how, initially technology, the advances, you think that it's there to help us, but in a lot of these cases, like with shoes and that sort of stuff, it actually, creates bigger problems down the road. There may be a short-term comfort, but the long-term issues end up hurting us more than the little short-term, not having as much support in your shoe, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I could say a lot about the problem of comfort in our society and this seeking of comfort that we have. I mean, our bodies, for example, were designed to sleep on the floor. Like our lungs, our rib cage needs that hard surface for pressure in order to have that full lung capacity, and we don't have it. We sleep in these NASA mattresses that are designed with space age technology, and yes, super comfortable, but it's really interesting to see what we miss then when we don't create some hard edges to push against. We need some resistance, we need some discomfort in order to grow our resilience.
Yeah, fascinating for sure. Kathy, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to, bring up to the listeners before we wrap things up?
Well, I would just say to the listeners that if they are thinking about a mindful movement practice, like don't even call it yoga. If you've got ideas of what yoga is in your mind, and it's like some Lululemon Instagram yoga, 20-year-old something flexible bunny, like erase all of that. Think of it as a mindful movement, and to really go out and really seek a teacher, and don't despair if you don't find the right teacher, the right class. Like just look and you will find someone. There are plenty of us out there who do a much more mindful movement kind of practice that's slow, that's meditative, that helps you get into your body and really restore it. And just really encourage the listeners to go out and find that for themselves, and yeah, keep looking until you find the right teacher, because you'll find the right teacher for you.
Yeah, I love that. And Kathy, if anybody's interested in learning more about your specific program, how can they find you on the internet? How can they sign up? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, if they go to www.Kathy White Yoga, that's Kathy with a K, White as in the color, yoga, all one word, kathywhiteyoga.com. So kathywhiteyoga.com. And on my front page, they can sign up for my Joint Renewal Guide, which gives them a free membership to Kathy White Yoga membership. And in the free area, there's a couple of videos, there's a bit more information. They can read the guide. And also on that web page, front page, there's book a class. There's a little tab that says book a class. So if you're ready to go and you want to join me on Zoom, because I do teach internationally on Zoom, I have students in New Zealand, Bermuda, Germany, the UK, Canada, America. So yeah, all over the world, people join me on Zoom. So if people are interested in booking a class, they can also do that, fill in a new student form. And I'm delighted that they would want to reach out and join me.
Awesome. So Kathy, that brings me to my final question. As you know, the subtitle to the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes. So it's one of the little things that Kathy does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place.
I say one of the easiest yoga poses that you can do, and you can do it anywhere, and it always benefits yourself and others, is just to gently bring up the corners of your lips and smile. It's a very simple pose, and a smile can go a tremendously long way. It changes everything within you, within your own heart. It's beautiful for the person who receives the smile, especially when it's a stranger and you can see I was traveling yesterday in an airport and just smiling as my practice, and just seeing people, they're hurried, they're rushed, they're worried about missing their flight, and you just walk past with a gentle smile, and they just suddenly awaken and light up. So that would be the one yoga pose I think we can all do, no matter what shape or size or however condition our body is in. A smile is an easy pose to do.
Yeah, I love it. And that is actually the most common answer that I get from people, is to smile, a smile and a wave, or, just a gesture of kindness. So it is definitely one of those small things that turns into a very big thing. So I love that answer. Absolutely love that answer. So folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. While you're there, pick up a copy of my most recent book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. And Kathy, I really appreciated this conversation. Very insightful. Thanks for taking the time to be on the show today.
Oh, you're so welcome, Dan. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.